All right, it's time for another update and forecast on the wildfires going on in California. Overall, earlier today was very similar to the last 2 days where we had that large smoke layer over our fires, and that was keeping the temperatures and the winds relatively cool and calm throughout the earlier morning hours throughout the day today. But as you can see, just like yesterday afternoon and the afternoon before that, we break through that nice smoke inversion that keeps the fire calm, and especially the Dixie Fire is seeing a lot more activity right now than it previously was earlier today. And once again on the Dixie Fire, we're seeing a large amount of activity in those same two places, especially that northern edge of the fire and the northeastern edge, which is the area closest to Greenville. But we're also seeing another plume pop up on the very southern side of the Dixie Fire, so we're going to have to take a close look at that to see if that's possibly a new fire start, or hopefully that's just a firing operation to clear out some vegetation, but definitely an area that we weren't seeing burning in the past. Right about there, you're going to see that pop up. And we can also take a look at the live cam as well to see if we can actually see any of these smoke plumes. But overall, there is a large number of fires that we're going to be going over. So we have the Dixie Fire here, we have the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, the Summer and Haypress Fires, and the Antelope Fire as well. Although, some good news, looks like the Antelope Fire is much calmer than it was in previous days. In previous days, that was one of the largest smoke plumes that we were seeing. At one point, it actually was creating its own thunderstorm and it started its own lightning fire. So good to see that the Antelope appears to have calmed down today, but Dixie is going to be the main one that we're looking at, as lots of activity going on that one as of right now. So let's actually just dive right into the Dixie Fire, because again, I believe that's the one that the most people are interested in. I was thinking about the fact that a great thing for me to do for these videos, since we are trying to cover so many different fires, would be for me to do one of those YouTube polls and have people vote on what they would like me to spend the most time on. But I imagine most people are interested in the Dixie, so we will be spending the most time looking at the Dixie, just on the updates, on all the information that has happened since our last update and forecast yesterday. We're also going to look at what it's doing right now. As you could see, looks like there is a lot of active growth and possibly even that new fire start on the southern edge there. Again, hoping that's just a firing operation. But then we're also going to be looking at the fire weather forecast and taking a very close look at that, because there are going to be some challenging conditions coming in over the next few days. It looks like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're going to be seeing some challenging fire weather conditions, with temperatures getting back up into the mid-90s, possibly even the triple digits as well, and some very dry air too. So, hate to say it, but looking at the fire weather forecast, it looks like Dixie Fire will continue to burn over this next week as some very challenging conditions come in. So I see somebody just posted that there's some sad YouTube videos on Greenville. I unfortunately have to agree with that. There's that one day I actually finished up my live stream, and I went to Twitter and I opened up Twitter, and it was just video after video of all the destruction that had happened in Greenville. And that's actually changed how I make these update and forecast videos. Before, I would always just research for about an hour to 2 hours, put about 30 tabs all in a row, and then just go through all the information I'd learned and just present it. I wouldn't look at the live chat. I would just basically say the information that I'd previously learned. And ever since that night where the live chat was talking about Greenville, I finished the video and looked at Twitter, and it was all the footage coming out of Greenville. Ever since then, I've changed the format for these videos to be much more interactive. I try as best I can to look at the live chat. Again, it's always hard to talk and look at the live chat at the same time, but I try to make it more interactive and more up to date with what's actually going on right now. So we'll be looking at some of the live hotspots, we'll be looking at some of the live reports, and hopefully the incident report that should be coming out for the Cal Fire from Cal Fire in the next couple of minutes. Last time I checked, it still wasn't out yet. So again, looking at the Dixie Fire, where we left off last night, most of the winds were coming in from the southwest, so we had a lot of growth to the northeast. And you can see that that is still the case right now. And it does look like we had a large amount of growth yesterday. So how you can tell that there was a large amount of growth yesterday is where that previous fire perimeter was and where all those hotspots are. So you can see all of those hotspots outside of the previous day's fire perimeter. That's a good indication of where the new growth is. So again, mostly southwest winds pushing that fire farther to the northeast, both on that northern finger there and then on this northeastern finger as well. And I would say that's the area I'm the most concerned about right now, because it's still the area that's the closest to the largest amount of structures. And whenever you see those yellow dots, that tells you it's a good indication for some extreme fire activity versus when you just have those tiny little red dots. So good thing to do is actually look at where those structures are. We can turn it on right there. So again, yeah, that's why I'm mostly concerned about that northeastern finger right now. Based on the satellite imagery, it looks like there's a lot of smoke coming off. Looks like there's actually a pyrocumulus cloud. You'll be able to see it in 1 second here. Right there when you see that white puff and then another 2 white puffs right there. That tells you there's pyrocumulus. When that happens, you know there's a lot of rising air, which leads to some gusty, erratic winds at the surface where the fire is burning, and that can really make firefighting and containment very challenging, because you just get a lot of gusty, erratic winds all going around the fire, and you can see lots of activity going on right now. Let's actually, before we get into the numbers, I haven't actually looked at this yet, so we're going to be looking at this for the first time together. I'm interested to see if we have better visibility on the Dixie Fire throughout the day today. And all the past days, remember, the air quality was just absolutely terrible. We couldn't see anything on these live cams. It kind of just looked like Eagle's Nest right there, where it's just pure smoke and haze. But it looks like there's a couple options here for where we could actually see this fire. I think this one up here was the best view. Dyer Mountain 1. Yeah, that looks like it'll be a good view. I'll load the last 3 hours. And let's make it big. Alright, so it looks like a fair bit of activity right there. They scrolled away from it, but it looked like that was where that large pyrocumulus cloud was, right about there. And you can see that even though we're getting into the more nighttime hours right now, lots of activity currently going on. And this has actually been something that's been rather weird on the Dixie Fire over the last couple of days. Usually for fires, they peak around 4 o'clock. They peak at 4 o'clock because that's when it's the hottest, that's when it's the driest, and typically that's when it's the windiest as well. But we've seen some weird activity on the Dixie Fire over the last couple days, because it's almost like we have that strong smoke inversion throughout most of the day, and then it almost busts through that inversion by about 5, 6 o'clock each day, and then we actually see our largest fire activity around 6, 7, and 8 o'clock. Just to illustrate that again, you can look at the satellite imagery. Once this reloads, you'll be able to see it in the morning hours, where the smoke... So morning hours, I'm going to zoom out there. It's kind of hard to... Okay. Right. Man, this is not cooperating. Okay. So morning hours, you're not going to see that much activity on the Dixie Fire. That's when we have that nice little smoke inversion. It's keeping temperatures low, keeping winds calm. And then watch as we get later into the day, the Dixie Fire really starts to take off, and that's where some of those pyrocumulus clouds pop up as well. Now, the next thing that I'm very interested in seeing might even be easier to see it if we look at the natural color fire. You can see most of that activity on the northeastern section, lots of activity on the northeastern section, but we're also actually seeing some new activity on that little sliver of the fire right there. It looks like it's almost directly west of Lake Almanor. So let's actually see if we can see where those hotspots are on this map. We'll change it to the live heat signature. Looks like it's right there. So on this map, sometimes this is the easier one to see the fire perimeter, that would be right about there. Now, I'm not actually sure if this is a firing operation or if this is a part of the fire that just flared up again. If anybody knows, please let me know in the live chat and I'll try my best to actually read it for once. But yeah, definitely seeing more activity on that western edge of the fire than we were in previous days. But what I'm hoping is that that is just a firing operation. But given the smoke plume and just how much activity is right there, I would be surprised if that's just a firing operation. They also usually do firing operations when the conditions are the best. So during nighttime or early morning, that's always the best time to do firing operations. So I would be a little surprised if they were doing this in the peak fire hours of the day. So I'm just going to take one look at the live chat to see if anybody's answered the question, if they know exactly what that is on the western edge there. Oh, it sounds like air quality is a little better in Reno this afternoon. Air quality is definitely better on the central coast as well, so enjoying that. Somebody commented on the fact that Dixie Fire a few days ago was 35%, but now it's at 21%. And the reason for that is because the overall perimeter got so much larger. It was at 35% before we broke through that northern edge right there, and you can see the Dixie Fire has just been taking off ever since. So if you think about the percentage of the perimeter that's contained versus the overall perimeter, if the overall perimeter grows, your percentage contained goes down. But again, key spots where we're seeing that activity as of right now, western edge, northern edge, and that northeastern edge, but especially that northeastern edge where we have those hot spots right around Lake Almanor on the western edge right there, and then the greatest fire activity on that northeastern finger right there. So again, my key concern is that northeastern finger because that's the area that appears to be closest to the largest amount of structures. If we go back to the modus and veers, this is one piece of good news I would say over the last couple of days is at least in CAL FIRE's update yesterday. I don't believe they did a full update this evening, but in their last update, they said they were feeling much more confident about the Chester area, and just crazy to see how that fire completely surrounded this area, and it didn't just go all the way through Chester. So amazing work done by our firefighters right there. But where I'm most curious is to find out if that is in fact a firing operation or if that is a new flare-up from what we were seeing yesterday. That certainly seems to be more activity in that area than we were seeing yesterday. Again, that's also a part of the fire where I have a large amount of concern because of all those structures on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. So if we look at the live hotspots, you can see where those hotspots are. But good news is the last update I could find, they said they had lots of resources in this area, dropping retardant lines, dropping dozer lines, and working as hard as they could to protect the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. But that's definitely one of my top concerns right now because you can see that hotspot right there, and we should be able to see that hotspot on the imagery as well. That actually looks to be the part of the fire that's burning the hottest right now, right near that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. So again, I would say that right now is my top concern on this fire. So we haven't gone over the new numbers yet for the Dixie Fire. So before we keep looking at the hotspots and the current containment, I will update you on the numbers for the Dixie Fire. It's officially up to 463,000 acres, which I believe, we have now moved up to the second largest wildfire in the history of California and the largest single fire in the history of California. So August Complex, that's where multiple fires all came together. Dixie Fire is the largest single fire. And another thing to mention here is the structures destroyed number looks like it has come up again as well. So before we look at that, I will say we remain at 21% containment, and there are still a large number of evacuation orders in place. So I have the link for that in the description below. And I purposely don't go over the evacuation orders because I always think it's better for people to get it straight from the source, so it reduces the risk of any confusion. So again, that link's in the description for all the recent evacuation orders, and it does look like we're seeing a lot of activity on the Dixie Fire right now. So if you live anywhere in this area, I would definitely check those out because there may be some changes since the last time you checked. Now, unfortunately, where there are some changes from the last time we checked is with the structures destroyed number. You can see this is up to 589 structures destroyed. So again, as always, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by not only the Dixie Fire, but all the various fires going on in Northern California, both this year and in previous years as well. And so, I will say some of that increase from yesterday, I forget exactly what it was yesterday. I think it was around 350, but it might not actually have been new structures that burned yesterday, but it's more likely that it was just those damage assessment teams bringing back that information of the Greenville and Canyon Dam areas that had burned in the past. So that's something we'd been saying this whole time is the damage assessment teams sometimes take a number of days to actually get those results back. So I think that's the majority of that increase in the structure destroyed number since the last time we looked at it. It's just those previous reports finally trickling in. Now, again, where I do have the largest concern right now, though, is where we do still see a large amount of those structures around that northeastern finger of the fire. If we look at the live imagery right there, it looks like that. Yeah, we do have some hot spots on that northern edge right there that certainly seeing a lot of heat kicking up right there, but not as many structures in that area. Where we have a large amount of structures is on that eastern edge of Lake Almanor, and then still around that Greenville area. And we can actually look at, I know I'm not the best at referring to all the different cities. I usually just say all the different fire names. So we'll look at some of the cities in this area. Again, we have Crescent Mills right here, Taylorsville, Genesee, hopefully I'm saying that one right, Moccasin, and Greenville right there. Again, you can see that large amount of Greenville, unfortunately, under that fire perimeter. And that's where a lot of that very, very bad footage we're seeing coming out over the last couple of days. And somebody just said, update the CAL FIRE page. So thank you for saying that, because it looks like last time it was updated was 2:40, 8 p.m. Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for mentioning to do that, because it's now up to 490,000 acres. So again, that keeps us in the number 2 spot, but up 30,000 acres since they had updated that report at 2 p.m. this afternoon. So that's unfortunate, and let's hope the structures destroyed number didn't go up either. And I believe the structures destroyed number did. It looks like we are now up to 627 structures destroyed, and I imagine most of that is from the area of Greenville, where Taylor just said 90% of Greenville was gone. So again, this is certainly a very challenging, bad situation in Northern California right now, and over the last couple of weeks. And just looking at the satellite imagery, it unfortunately does not look like we're out of the woods yet. We're seeing a lot of activity, and especially on that northeastern section of the fire. Again, zooming in there, we're seeing the most heat right now on that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. So which way is the fire heading? So best way to always see that, which basically the forecast for where the fire is going to move over the next couple of hours, is to look at what direction the smoke is going. So this might help explain it. So there's this low pressure system going through Washington, and as that goes through, think about a low pressure system, it has counterclockwise circulation. So on the very bottom of it, you have those winds going straight west to east, and you can actually see how that works here. As that low moves through it there, again, I would say it's good news for our fires in Northern California that low is going through Washington. We remember what happened the last time a low went directly over the fires. We had some wind gusts up to 25 to 30 miles per hour. We had that red flag warning, and that was really when we saw all of our fires flare up. Not just the Dixie, but the Mcfarland, the Monument, the Antelope as well. So the good news is the low is not directly over our fires, causing some extreme winds. The bad news is that the westerly winds that you can see would be associated with that counterclockwise circulation right there are continuing to push our fire to the east. And looks like there's almost even a little bit of northwesterly wind component in that as well. You can almost see how it shifts throughout the day as that low continued to move. It goes from a more northeastern direction at the beginning of the day to almost shifting down to a southeasterly direction. So again, that was just to answer the question, which way is this fire going to move? Best way to see that is by looking at the winds. Whichever way the winds are blowing that smoke is a pretty good indication of which direction the fire is going to continue to move. So if we look in here, so again, I'm not exactly sure if that's a firing operation on that western edge or if that's just a part of the fire that flared back up again right there, because we certainly weren't seeing that much activity right there yesterday. Yesterday we were only seeing it in the very northern and northeastern parts of the Dixie Fire, but you can see this smoke plume pop up over the last couple of hours. But again, based on those winds, that's mostly going to move that hotspot into the area that is already burned. So a lot of the fuels within there have already burned out, so that shouldn't be as of extreme. Like if we turn that fire perimeter back on, you can see that I would just be burning into this area where the fuel's already burned out. So hopefully that would mean that so I just want to read this comment real quick. The hotspot near eastern shore of Lake Almanor is heading straight toward Dyer Mountain. The alert wildfire cam is in its path as we speak. You can see the flames coming over the ridge on the cam. So I believe we actually already pulled up that cam. I'll just reload it. Oh, wow. Great comment in the live chat. Let's go 15 minutes and see what this has done in the last 15 minutes. Yeah, that's the weird thing about this fire is usually you have your largest fire activity at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon when it's the hottest, driest, and windiest. But over the last 3 days, because that smoke inversion in the morning, we're actually seeing our most extreme fire activity as we get into the later evening hours. And you can see lots of activity going on right now. As was said by Trish, where I'm reading the live chat's a bit far away, so I'm trying as best I can to read it. But yeah, you can see the flames coming over that mountain right now. So I'm just going to keep reloading this page. We're certainly going to have to keep our eye on it. So the other thing I want to see, let's see if there's any other cameras that are showing any activity. I'd love to know if we have any eyes on that western side of the Dixie Fire right now. So just looking in here, we were looking at the Dyer Mountain cam. It looks like that is the best shot of the smoke plume as of right now. And let's see. Yeah, I think the Dyer Mountain cam is the best one. And I do know if... okay, so let's just go back to the Dixie Fire. I never finished reading the update on all the numbers. So just in case you're just joining this live stream, Dixie Fire just got updated to 490,000 acres, 21% containment still. There's still a large number of evacuation orders in place. The structures destroyed number, unfortunately, has gone up since our report yesterday. It's up to 627 structures destroyed. But there is some good news. We got more resources on this fire since we were talking about it yesterday. We now have 30 helicopters, 525 engines, 129 dozers, 135 water tenders, 5,813 personnel, and 97 crews. I don't know if I've ever seen 5,800 personnel on a fire. So great to see that even though there are so many other large fires going on across the state, we could just zoom out here to see the imagery of that. We have the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, the Summer Fire, the Haypress Fire, the Antelope Fire. Somehow we keep finding the resources to try to control these fires. But again, lots of activity going on the Dixie Fire right now. So while I am zoomed out, and I did just mention the other fires, we'll just quickly go over the numbers for those. Although I'm going to mostly focus on the Dixie Fire throughout this video because it looks like there's a lot of activity going on right now, and we are seeing more activity near a larger amount of structures than any of our other fires. So again, you have to prioritize in some way, and I think Dixie Fire is certainly the priority right now. But first, let's just do a quick overview of some of the other fires going on, just in case anybody watching the live stream is mostly interested in those. We already went over the numbers for the Dixie Fire. We'll go back to the Dixie Fire in just a second, but first we'll take a look at the Mcfarland Fire. This one had a large amount of activity about 2 days ago. Yesterday we had one time where we did have a pyrocumulus cloud coming off of it, mostly seeing those hot spots on the eastern edge of the fire. One sec, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. So mostly seeing those hot spots on the eastern edge of the fire, and let's see what direction the winds are going. Looks like we had very weak winds throughout the early morning hours, the smoke basically just sitting over the fire. And then looks like, just like the Dixie, we start to get a wind shift later in the day. It starts almost northeast, and now it's almost moving directly to the east. So when it comes to the Mcfarland Fire, expecting to see more activity on the eastern side there, which again, we'll have to keep an eye on this one because it does look like it's getting closer to some of these structures on the southeastern edge of that fire, and that hotspot near those structures on the northern edge of the fire as well. So again, with the Mcfarland Fire, I believe there's a number of evacuation orders in place right now. So pretty sure I put the links for that in the description below. You should be able to find that. But when it comes to the numbers for the Mcfarland Fire, it is up to, actually let's update this. We learned our lesson on the Dixie Fire, it updated and increased by 30,000 acres. So Mcfarland Fire, 32,000 acres, 26% containment there. And what I'm interested to see is if, since we're able to find another 500 resources for the 500 personnel for the Dixie Fire, I'm interested to see if the personnel on the other fires actually decreased, but I believe this number actually increased. We're up to 676 personnel on the Mcfarland Fire. And then just north of the Mcfarland Fire, we have the Monument Fire. Out of the various lightning fires that started on the 29th and the 30th, we had, again, Mcfarland Fire here, Monument, Haypress, the Antelope Fire as well. Out of those, the Monument Fire has been seeing the most activity recently, and you can see a lot of that activity on the eastern edge of the fire, like we've been seeing with most of the fires right now, as the winds have been predominantly from the west. So if we look at the hot spots as of right now, let's actually make sure we're looking at the right one. So that one was the Mcfarland. Now we are talking about the Monument Fire. You can see where those hot spots are. Again, my main concern right now are all those structures right there. So let's actually see what town that appears to be. Looks like we have Helena, hopefully I'm saying that right, or Helena, and then we have Junction City as well. If we look at where those structures are, it looks like there's a large amount of structures, and we do have those hot spots right there. So we're going to have to keep our eye on this because, again, when we're looking at the winds, they're blowing that smoke plume to the east, which means the winds are blowing from the west, which means the fire is going to want to move to the east as well. So good thing that we still have a large amount of resources on this fire. I imagine they're just putting in a large amount of dozer lines. Hand crews are working right here. most likely, or hopefully some aircraft as well. I'd have to check on that though, because visibility is relatively low right now. So we'll have to double check on that when we look in here. So Monument Fire overall, let's just update it again. It's at 50,000 acres, so lots of activity on this one over the last couple of days. Containment just at 3% right now. And if we look at the personnel, that one does look like it increased yesterday. So honestly, I don't know where they keep finding all these new resources, because every fire we've looked at seems to be increasing in personnel over the last couple of days. So up to over 600 there. And when it comes to this fire, really all these fires on the northwestern parts of California, the main thing they talk about is just how dry the fuels are over here. And that's actually a factor that's playing a big role in all of our various fires. If we look at the drought monitor right now, this is a good indication for why wildfire is so bad throughout California, and especially this season. 85% of the state of California is in that extreme drought category, and a large portion of Northern California is in that exceptional drought category. So the drier the fuels are, the easier it is for fires to start, and then also easier it is for those fires to spread once they have started. So when it comes to the Monument Fire, again, we're going to have to keep a close eye on that one, especially that northeastern section right there, as winds are mostly blowing from the west, and it does look like we have a large amount of structures just to the east of that. So definitely going to keep my eye on that one throughout the course of this live stream. Now, if we keep looking here, just north of that, we have the Haypress Fire, which they're also calling the River Complex. Again, I believe that one's included with the River Complex right there. I actually don't have the link up for how many acres have burned on this one. So let's see if we can find it. This is something we haven't been able to find in the past. Looks like River Complex right there. Says that one is up to 25,000 acres with 5% containment and 560 personnel on that one. So, and then that also just sums up kind of the fire weather forecast that we're under right now. A trough will bring slightly milder temperatures today and Monday. So we looked at that trough earlier. It's the one going through Washington. So this has actually been some good news for our fires over the last couple of days, because the trough itself isn't directly over Northern California. We saw what happened to our fires when the trough was directly over California that last time. It brought the red flag warning. We had wind gusts around 25 to 35 miles per hour. And with that trough going through Washington instead, we have still had some strong winds in the later afternoons, but much calmer conditions in the morning hours than when we had that red flag warning over us. And we did see some decrease in our temperatures, as we were just looking at on that description right there. Trough of low pressure brought a few degrees of cooling and slightly higher humidity. So slightly cooler temperatures, slightly more moisture. That's been better for our fires, especially in the morning hours. But again, we get that nice smoke inversion in the morning hours, but then it seems like over the last couple of days, and as of right now, once we get to about 5, 6, 7 o'clock, we break through that inversion and the fire activity picks up once again. So again, just one last look on the River Complex fires. That is at 25,000 acres. And again, I'm sure I haven't really been able to read the live chat that much, but I'm sure somebody has asked why they keep naming wildfires the River Fire. We have the River Complex up here. We have the River Fire that burned just a few days ago and actually took out over 80 structures. And then we also had a River Fire about 3 weeks ago. So again, if anyone knows the answer to that, I know they usually name wildfires based on a nearby landmark or a nearby street, but not sure why they keep naming wildfires the same thing in the same season. So, and then just north of there, let's go up to the Antelope Fire. That's one fire that we had a large amount of activity on 2 days ago and 1 day ago. You can see the little hotspot right there. But as of right now, looking better than in previous days. There was one day where the pyrocumulus cloud was so large on this one that it actually created its own lightning storm and started a new lightning fire. So good to see that one at least a little calmer right now than in the past, although Dixie Fire certainly seeing a large amount of activity. So again, right after Antelope, we'll get back to the Dixie. I just wanted to do a quick update on the other fires first. So Antelope Fire, we'll update it again as we learned our lesson on the Dixie Fire to always update the page. That one is at 42,000 acres, 24% containment, and personnel on that still over 600. So somehow we still have over 500 personnel on all of those other fires like Mcfarland, Monument, and Antelope. But again, the big priority right now is that Dixie Fire. So I think now would be a good time to go back to the Dixie Fire because again, we saw some activity in the early morning hours, and then in the last hour or two, the Dixie Fire has just started to take off. So you can see that large pyrocumulus cloud right on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor as of right now. If we look at the natural color fire, you can see it even better. You'll see it flare up right there, which is one of the hottest hotspots that we've seen on the Dixie Fire since we've been following it, which has been, I believe, about 3 weeks now. I've been doing update and forecast videos on the Dixie Fire. Now, the other new information on this one is that western edge that seems to be flaring up as of right now. And again, hopefully somebody has said this in the live chat so you can find the answer in there. Again, I'm not the best at looking at maps, talking, and reading at the same time. So sorry for the most part ignoring the live chat. But again, that western edge certainly flaring up more than we had seen in past days. And if we actually want to see where that hotspot is, one last thing I'll say about all those other fires like Mcfarland, Monument, Haypress, Antelope, River Complex. I put the link. I believe I put all the links in the description for those fires. If not, you can always go to insaweb.com because I do know there's a large amount of evacuation orders in place for those fires. But again, getting back to the Dixie Fire, we'll zoom in here. You can see those hotspots on the western edge right there. That's the new information since yesterday where we didn't see that activity. Again, I'm hoping that's just a firing operation, but if we look at the live hotspots, you can see that slight hotspot right there. Oh, it got bigger. It just needed a little time to load. So much larger hotspot than when we were seeing in previous days. But again, the main area that I'm concerned about right now is that large hotspot right near the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. Now, again, I don't believe CAL FIRE did an update this evening. I was hoping they would so that I could stream it and then answer your guys' questions in the live chat like we did yesterday. I definitely found that helpful. It was nice to be able to go over that CAL FIRE update at the same time as with all of you guys. But that's definitely concerning right there. But if I have to say some good news, the last CAL FIRE update I was able to watch, I know that this was one of their top priorities. They had a large amount of resources, getting lots of dozer lines, dropping retardant, anything they could to protect this eastern shore of Lake Almanor. But that looks to be the most critical part of this fire right now, as again, you can see it flare up over the last hour or two. So sometimes I regret doing this, but we're just going to check Twitter real quick to see if there's any images coming out from that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. So this is actually the camera we were looking at earlier, so I could just pull it up so we could look at it on the big screen and make sure it's the most recent update. So let's go 1 hour. It seems like that's when it really started picking up. This is the Dyer Mountain camera. You can see large amount of smoke being thrown up right here, but not those giant smoke plumes. Where we see the big smoke plume is right there. And then we're actually going to start to see some of these flames coming over the mountain in just a second here. But lots of activity. One thing I noticed on this map, it looks like the winds appear to be pretty strong right now, even though we're fairly late in the day. And then obviously the main thing you notice are those large flame lengths as that fire comes over the mountain. So let's just replay that again, because that's one of the craziest, I usually don't like to use words like that, but that's one of the craziest live camera shots that we've seen on the Dixie Fire since it began. With that, actually I want to try to pause it at that one area where they show the smoke plume. Look to be right. Hard to pause it on this. We'll just play it through. There's one shot where you can see how large the smoke plume is right there. And then again, you'll start to see, yeah, so somebody said, I doubt that's a backburn on the western edge of the Dixie Fire. And I would have to agree, just because of the fact that if they were doing some kind of firing operation, I imagine they would have done it in the early morning hours or even waited for the overnight hours. Because as you can see, very challenging conditions going on right now. Lots of fire activity. Let's just play that again, because again, that's one of the craziest shots that I've seen coming out of the Dixie Fire as those flames come over. Again, this is the Dyer Mountain camera right now. So there's that shot of how high the smoke plume is going. Again, something I always talk about is when you have that much rising air, that's where the wildfire really starts creating its own weather, because the air rises and you can't just have a vacuum down here. So that has a large amount of air rushing into the fire. And then somebody in the live chat yesterday asked about fire tornadoes. Fire tornadoes themselves are actually pretty rare. The more common thing that you usually see that are often called fire tornadoes, but most of the time they're actually just fire whirls. But you usually see those when you do have a large smoke plume coming up like this. And then as that air rises, you get more air rushing in. And then if it's rushing in at different speeds from different directions, that's what leads to that circulation, which can then sometimes lead to those fire whirls. And as we've seen throughout this season on a number of fires, in the most extreme cases, fire tornadoes as well. But again, this is a camera we're just going to have to keep reloading, because looks like it's about to come right over that mountain right there. So again, when it comes to the Dixie Fire, we'll just update that one more time. But that is almost up to 500,000 acres, and the Dixie Fire is now the number 2 largest wildfire in the history of California. Largest single fire in the history of California. And if we go down here, the other unfortunate news coming out of the Dixie Fire is the structures destroyed is now up to 630. Again, I don't believe as much of that was from new activity yesterday, but was more from those damage assessment reports coming out from the Greenville and Canyon Dam areas based on all of that damage that we had a number of days ago. So I haven't really dove into the Dixie Fire forecast yet. So let's just take this time. This is a cool little trick that you can do. You get the lat long from the Dixie Fire right there. Then you go to windy.com. And as always, but first I'll show you how to do it. Throw it into the search bar and it'll take you right to the Dixie Fire. Looks like it's more on the center of the fire right now, but I want to look at the part of the fire that, again, we're seeing the most activity, which is that eastern shore of Lake Almanor right there. You're going to see it flare up in a second. So I'm actually going to put our fire weather forecast directly over that area because, again, I think that's the top priority on the Dixie Fire as we move forward. So let's look at the high temperatures for tomorrow. Looks like we're actually going to start getting a bit warmer, should be around 87 degrees. If we look at, and then again, reason temperature is important, that one's pretty intuitive. Warmer it is, the worse the wildfire is going to be. When it comes to humidity, you can see lots of dry air throughout this region, around 15%. In some cases, we get down into the low teens or the single digits as well. Looks like pretty constant 15% right there. So again, the reason relative humidity is so important is because the drier the air is, the drier those fuels get, and then the faster the fire can spread. And as we've seen on the Dixie Fire, it also makes spot fires more likely. You can most likely see an example of one of those spot fires on this map somewhere. Let's go back to the Dixie Fire. This is something that has been playing a huge role on the Dixie Fire throughout its entire lifetime, is where I'd say that's a pretty good example right there. So spot fire is a reason that winds temperature and humidity are all very important. So you can imagine on a very windy day, it can pick up some burning embers from the major blaze here, toss it out over, in some cases, the previous containment lines. And then if it's very hot, that means usually your relative humidity is going to be very low, which means your fuels are going to be dry as well. And then that makes it much more likely that that burning ember is going to be able to start a new little fire, as you can see on that northeastern section of the Dixie Fire. And then once those get established, then that's where you get some very gusty, erratic winds as it's flowing into all these different hotspot points. That's where you get some more extreme fire behavior and just rapid rate of spread. So again, on the Dixie Fire, that's been one of the things that has caused the most challenges throughout its lifetime. I'll actually remind you, it wasn't all that long ago that we were feeling great about the Dixie Fire. We had that great firing operation over the entire northern edge. They had some strong firing operations on this northeastern edge as well, some dozer lines in place. And then it's a perfect example of why you always have to look at the fire weather forecast, because there was a number of days where it was hot, dry, and windy. And what happened was some of those smoldering areas on the fire that were still burning were able to pick back up, flare back up, and be able to kick up enough burning embers that were carried by that wind to actually go over the previous firing operations and dozer lines and containment lines to start new little fires. And ever since then, the Dixie Fire has just not stopped growing. You can see that northern section of the fire, I believe, grew about 15 miles in one day. And over the last 2 days, winds have mostly been from the west. Again, the reason for that is that low pressure system that's going through Washington right now. You have counterclockwise circulation around it. So on the bottom, you can imagine you have those winds going west to east. So on all of our fires, the majority of the growth over the last couple of days has been to the eastern edges of those fires as the winds just continue to push it forward. Again, on that northern section of the Dixie Fire, we do have a large hotspot flaring up there right now, but not as many structures in that area, where we do have a large amount of structures. And also the largest hotspot is right around that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. We have that cluster of structures. Let's see if we can zoom in and actually get some of the not the best at showing the most recent hotspots, but again, we have that east shore of Lake Almanor. That's, I would say, my key concern right now, is that is also the largest hotspot we see on the Dixie Fire, really flaring up over the last hour or two. Now, one piece of good news, you guys know me, I always try to find some good news, is if you look at the direction the smoke is blowing, it's, again, because of that low pressure system up here, as it goes through counterclockwise circulation, our winds are mostly from the west to the east in Northern California. So that means that the wind is mostly blowing that smoke to the east. You can actually see it in the imagery right there. And that also means that it's mostly pushing the fire to the east as well. So again, why that is good news is if we turn on this fire perimeter, you can see that inside of that area of the Dixie Fire where it's flaring up the most right now, that's where it's already burned. So that area of the Dixie Fire that's burning the hottest right now, with those westerly winds, will hopefully just push the fire into where it's already burned and where there's not as much fuel, so that'll hopefully calm down some of the fire behavior. Now, the other great news when it comes to that wind direction is if we look at where that giant hotspot is right now, if we had, again, you ideally like it to not move at all, but if you had to have it move one direction, you would prefer that to be a westerly wind, because you can see the large amount of structures right on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor, and you can imagine if we had an easterly wind, that would be blowing this fire directly into those structures. But as we just saw, that's not the case, mostly a westerly wind, which will act to push that fire further to the east, and in some cases where the fire has already burned in the past. So hopefully that calms down the fire activity as well. Now, one other thing, again, stretching for some good news right now, because it looks like the Dixie Fire is seeing another one of those another one of those situations where it's flaring back up and it's near a large amount of structures. So certainly a lot of things to worry about right now. But one thing that that's interesting. So this is a big thing we were talking about yesterday, was the fact, let's go back to the perimeter, was the fact that the sheep fire burned here in 2020. So the main thing that we were hoping for on the Dixie Fire is that as it moved up to where the sheep fire burned in 2020, it would stop in its tracks. And it looks, so that, I wish they had more colors here, but it looks like that area down there is the Moonlight Fire that burned in 2007. Right there's the Dixie Fire. And based on this imagery, it looks like it's doing exactly what we were hoping would happen during that update and forecast yesterday. So where the sheep fire burned in 2020, you can imagine it burned out a lot of these fuels right here. So what we were predicting yesterday is that as it got to this area, it would slow down where a lot of those fuels had previously been burned out and possibly have some containment lines already put in place right here as well. And at first glance, it looks like that's exactly what happened. Dixie Fire almost stops as it gets to that sheep fire area and then almost just acts to spread around it. So basically just a perfect example of how previous fires removing some of the fuels help to calm down some of the fire behavior that's currently going on. You can imagine if that sheep fire wasn't there, it would have just continued to take off in this direction. So again, kind of stretching for some good news, but the reason that is such great news is where we have this very large amount of structures. Again, that's quite a ways away, but we have seen how fast the Dixie Fire can move. Again, we had that one day where it went about 15 miles in one day. So there's no telling what it can do. We have that large amount of structures up here, but the great news is that we have the 2020 sheep fire between that, and it already looks like it's calming down some of the fire activity as of right now. Now let's switch it to the live imagery to see if it's still holding true. And it looks like some of those hotspots have started to move into the sheep fire area, but for the most part, it still looks like it's working to go around and to the left. But again, let's hope that a large amount of fuels should be burnt out right here. So I'm hoping that protects all of these structures up here, but you can see how much growth we've had on the Dixie Fire over the last 24 hours. So usually the previous fire perimeter is from maybe 24 hours ago or the previous day, and it's a good indication to see where that fire growth has been. I'll make it a little easier to see right here. So that's what it looked like, I believe, at the end of yesterday. And based on the live, I'll switch it to the live shot right here, and you'll be able to see where the majority of the growth has been throughout the day today. And as of right now, again, we're looking at that satellite imagery. It certainly looks like it's flaring up right now. So a lot of that growth again, right on that northern edge of the fire and that large hotspot right by the eastern shore of Lake Almanor there. So again, turning on the structures. Key concerns right now, we have that, wherever you see the red, that's where you have a lot of fire activity going on. We have those structures down there that I'm sure we have a large amount of resources actively trying to protect those areas. Eastern shore of Lake Almanor, where the last CAL FIRE update I could find, they did say that they were working as hard as they could to get some lines in here to protect those structures. The one thing working for us when it comes to this area is that the winds are blowing from the west. So that would act to push this fire to the east, which again is good news for those structures on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. And then the other slight piece of good news is we do have the 2020 sheep fire between the active hotspots and that large amount of structures just to the north of there. So again, we are still seeing some of those hotspots go into the 2020 sheep fire. So again, an overused word, but a pretty applicable word that gets used on the Dixie Fire is unprecedented. And it looks like that seems to be the case in most fires. When it moves up to where there has been a previous fire, it almost just stops it in its tracks. but it looks like we are still able to see some growth through where the sheep fire burned in the past. But again, overall, that is some good news though, because at least some of these fuels would have been cleared out, and that should help firefighters to defend this northern perimeter better than if the sheep fire weren't there at all. So haven't gone over the numbers in a little while, so I'll just go over that again just in case people are new to the live chat. We'll update it. Dixie Fire is up to 490,000 acres, and that does make it the second largest wildfire in the history of California, and the largest single wildfire in the history of California. When it comes to the containment, we went from 35% down to 21%. There's a large number of evacuation orders in place, so you can click the link in the description to find the most recent information. And unfortunately, we have had an update with the structures destroyed. It is now up to 627 structures destroyed, with most of that coming out of the Greenville and Canyon Dam areas, where those damage assessment teams were able to go in there over the last couple of days, and you can see the increase in structures destroyed as that information came in. So, as always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. Now, the good news on the Dixie Fire is we do have over 5,800 personnel on it, and in many cases, they are working around the clock to protect structures and lives in this area. So, one thing that I want to finish up here, let's look at the fire weather forecast for tomorrow. And we're mostly focusing on that area of the Dixie Fire that's burning the most actively right now. Again, it's right on that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. You can see it. Thank you very much, White Dove, for the for the super chat. I think you called it. I'm once again in Salinas right now. I have another night shift at KSBW, and like I said yesterday, there's some great Mexican food around this area, so I think after this live stream, I'll try to grab a quick burrito before the 11 o'clock show. So one thing that I was saying is, looking at the natural color fire, the largest hotspots, again, northern edge, still seeing some active fire up there, but there's not that many structures up there. A new hotspot is on that western edge of the Dixie Fire right here, which certainly wasn't flaring up yesterday, but appears to be flaring up right now. But the largest hotspot right on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. So let's look at the fire weather forecast for tomorrow to see what kind of conditions we can expect. Looks like it is going to be slightly warmer than it was today, around 87 degrees. Very dry air as well, about 15% relative humidity, so the drier the air is, the drier the fuels get, which means the easier it is for that fire to spread. But the big factor whenever it comes to fire spread is the wind gusts. I believe this needs to update. So wind gusts looks to be about 25 miles per hour, which is certainly significant. It's not as bad as when we had that red flag warning over the area and we had 35 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts, but certainly still going to be a challenging day tomorrow, but really, again, better conditions than we're going to be seeing later in the week. So that's something I haven't really mentioned yet in this video, but I should point out now is that the fire weather forecast is looking very challenging as we get into Wednesday and Thursday this week. Still going to have some strong winds, but we're going to have some very warm temperatures getting up to about 90 on Thursday. Looks to be even warmer on Wednesday, about 92 degrees in this area, and relative humidity even lower, getting into the low teens to the single digits. So seeing a lot of fire activity right now and very critical fire weather coming in throughout this week. So again, I'm going to be following the Dixie Fire very closely over this entire next week. I'll try to do these live streams every single day because, hate to say it, but we have some challenging conditions ahead of us, and we are seeing a large amount of activity right now. Now, I believe so I saw that one comment. Somebody said, is Westwood in danger? So let's just put in Westwood right here. Hopefully this works. Usually seems to work. So, I believe that's Westwood right there, that area of structures. Unfortunately, it looks like that is what we were talking about, where there is the largest amount of fire activity. That was pretty close to the area we were just looking at, the fire weather forecast. You can see where that heat signature is. And again, that's the part of the Dixie Fire that has certainly flared up over the last hour or two. Lots of activity going on right there. And it looks like mostly on the northern section of that hotspot there. So that is, I'm just going to update this again just to double check. So again, that's another one of our top priorities right now to continue to follow throughout the course of this live stream. And I plan on going another hour. I think that's where I probably have another hour before I have to get back to getting my forecast ready for my shift at KSPW. But again, looking at this map, where those hotspots are, key concern is that eastern shore of Lake Almanor, but the winds are in our favor right now. Again, thank you very much, John, for the super chat, and agreed, very well said. Hope and encouragement for all the residents affected. Certainly thoughts and prayers to everyone who already has been affected, and thoughts and prayers to anybody who may be affected in the future. And I hate to say that, but we are seeing a very, very tricky situation right now as we have that large hotspot activity on that eastern shore of Lake Almanor, where we do have the structures on the eastern shore, and then also Westwood as well, which is just north of where we're seeing the largest amount of fire activity. So, just zooming out here, actually the next thing I want to do is just look at Twitter. Again, I said that sometimes we regret doing this, but this is sometimes the best place to find the most recent updates and information, and it looks like we have a developing situation right now, especially around that eastern shore of Lake Almanor area. So let's see if we can find any footage coming out of there. And looks like as the smoke cleared up today, air tankers were able to come out and drop on the west side of the fire today, so that's good. We weren't seeing that in previous days because there was so much smoke that we had to ground most of the aircraft. And if visibility is good tomorrow, they'll be able to come out again. Here's a time lapse. Now, one thing I want to do, I want to go to CA Fire Scanner. This is a great Twitter account to follow, as they have good updates. Let's see. 35 minutes ago, Dixie Fire east of Greenville, Sunday evening, nearly 500,000 acres. Pretty cool shot of the horses in there. The craziest shot coming out of the Dixie Fire, though, we can look at it again. I'm just going to reload it. I would say this is one of the craziest shots we've seen on the entire lifetime of the Dixie Fire. Again, what I keep saying about this is with all that rising air, that's when new air rushes in around the Dixie Fire, so you get some gusty, erratic winds, and you can see the fire starting to come over this mountain right here, and you can also see how high some of these flame lengths are. And then again, switching to the nighttime cam. But I think that sums up how weird the Dixie Fire is how much activity we've been seeing the last 3 nights, even during the nighttime hours. I'll just replay that one more time because, again, unbelievable footage coming out from the Dyer Mountain camera right now. As the flames start to come over that mountain right there, and you can see that the fire certainly has picked up. So that was what I was about to say, is how strange this fire has been the last couple of days, because we're seeing more activity around 8 p.m. than we're usually seeing around 4 p.m. So usually 4 p.m. is the worst time of the fire, where it's very hot, it's very dry, it's very windy. But over the last couple of days, we've had so much smoke over our fires that it's been actually keeping them calmer throughout the early morning days. And then, sorry, I was reading that live chat. Somebody said, go look at the Indian Ridge camera. All right, let's check it out right now. So the last time I looked at this one, it was just complete haze. I couldn't see anything. But let's see what it's looking like right now. Again, that's That's part of the reason it's so much better to do these videos more interactive than how I used to do them, where I just research for 2 hours and then spew out all the information I'd found. It's much better to do it interactive because you guys actually help to make these videos better. You ask some great questions, really focus on which cities I should be looking at, and as well point out unbelievable live camera shots like what we're seeing from Indian Ridge right now, and especially once it shifts to that nighttime camera, you can see where that fire activity is. So big smoke plume right there. I believe that's one of those pyrocumulus clouds we were looking at earlier. And then you can see once it switches to the nighttime cam, you can see where that fire is burning most actively. So again, I just want to go back to Twitter because right here is what is one of the best things to look at for information. So we're just going to go through this real quick because there wasn't a CAL FIRE update this evening. So this, you can use this as your CAL FIRE update because this is the official CAL FIRE incident update that they had at 7 p.m. So again, that fire is the Dixie Fire is up to 490,000 acres, so almost 500,000 acres at this point, and that does make it the second largest wildfire in the history of California. Now, I always try to stretch for some good news. The good news is knock on wood, there hasn't been any fatalities on this fire. We do have 3 firefighter injuries though, so I certainly hope that they're recovering and end up being well over the next couple of days. So that is one of my big concerns on this fire right now. You can see 13,800 structures threatened right now. If we just want to see where some of those threatened structures are, we can zoom out right here. We can look at the current hotspots. You can see much more activity showing up right now than in the previous 2 evenings, and especially on that eastern area around Lake Almanor and Westwood as well. That's one of my key areas of concern right now, is we had a huge pyrocumulus cloud coming up right there. But you can see all the structures around the Dixie Fire. So 13,000 structures threatened right now, and updated numbers, 627 structures destroyed as those damage assessment reports have been coming back. So looks like 400 structures destroyed, 227 minor structures destroyed, 27 structures damaged, 15 other minor structures were damaged. Now, before I read these, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. So, just to remind you, the west zone of the Dixie Fire, when we're thinking about that, the key areas of concern on that one is that new flare-up that we're seeing on the western edge of the Dixie Fire right there, and then also that northern edge, and especially that northeastern edge that has just continued to get fueled by the westerly and southwesterly winds over the last couple of days. So just going back, we'll look at the west zone first, which again is those hot spots right there. The CAL FIRE update for the west zone. Fire activity increased today due to low relative humidity and strong southwest winds. So 2 ways to visualize that. We can look at the fire color activity. You can see west zone certainly picked up right there today. That was an area of the fire that we saw very little activity for really the last week, but certainly flared up this afternoon. And then that northeastern section has just continued to be fueled by those westerly winds. And then if we look at the temperatures that we had this afternoon, we'll go up here. That's probably relatively close to the west zone. Very dry air, relative humidity in the teens. Temperature was in the high 70s. In some cases on this west zone, you do get into the 80s. But again, if you missed this earlier in the live stream, the key concern later this week is there's a warm, dry weather pattern coming in. So we're going to start to see more conditions that are going to be bad for wildfire, where our temperatures get back into the mid 90s and we have relative humidity in the low teens to even the single digits as well. So basically what they're saying on the west zone right there, due to low relative humidity and strong southwest winds. I would love to say that that's not going to be a factor later this week and we'll be seeing moisture and some cool air coming in, but unfortunately, as we get into the midweek and later this week, it's actually just going to be getting hotter and drier. So again, I'm going to be doing these live streams every single day to continue to follow the Dixie Fire. So they also say drought conditions are extreme in the region. We have that map up, so I might as well show it. You can see that 85% of the state of California is in that extreme drought category, which is the bright red, and then a large portion of Northern California is in that exceptional drought category. And this is the other thing I show at the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. We actually go up into the mountains, we cut plants, you weigh them, you dry them out in an oven, then weigh them again, and based on the difference in weight, it tells you how much moisture was in the plant. And you can see that that green line is our average values since we started this fuel moisture data set in 2009. That red line is the record low values in previous years, and that blue line is how dry the fuels are right now. So the fuels right now are drier than our Fire Weather Research Laboratory has ever recorded, and I know a number of other labs are showing record dry fuels as well. So that sums up pretty well what they're saying. Drought conditions are extreme in the region. And again, just the drier your fuels are, the easier it is for that fire to spread. And as we've seen on the Dixie Fire, the easier it is for those spot fires to ignite. We've seen about 90 to 100% ignition rates with some of those spot fires on the Dixie Fire. So it's kind of the interaction. You get low relative humidity, which means you get drier fuels, and then you get those strong southwest winds pushing the flames forward and then also leading to more spot fires, which are more likely when you have low relative humidity. So weather certainly not cooperating with us on the Dixie Fire right now. So continuing, fire crews continue to construct and reinforce control lines. I think the key place I want to point that out is on that area around the eastern shore of Lake Almanor, where we have the largest hotspot on the Dixie Fire right now. The last CAL FIRE report I could find said they had a large amount of resources in here working as hard as they could to get some good dozer lines, some control lines in here to make sure that that fire doesn't spread into that area. But again, certainly a concern right there, as that's a part of the fire where we're seeing the most extreme growth right now, and also the Westwood area, as again, southwesterly winds like to push a fire more to the north and northeast. So certainly let's actually update this again. So it looks like the hotspots still aren't over Westwood. So that's at least some good news for the time being, but we're certainly going to have to keep watching that area as we move forward in this live stream. Now, one other thing I just want to show, just in case you're new to the chat, is some of the footage coming out from the Dixie Fire as of right now. So this one is the Dyer Mountain camera, and you'll see how much this fire activity picked up this afternoon. You're about to see a huge pyrocumulus smoke plume, and then these flames start to come over this ridge. You can especially see those flames as it switches to the nighttime camera right there. And then if we look, let's actually load that again. And I think I'd rather look at it at 1 hour. So you can see that large smoke plume coming off, and then you'll start to see those flames coming over the mountain right here. And one thing I do notice on this is how much fuel is in this area. So if that fire comes over this ridge line right here, there's going to be nothing to stop it to just go through all of these trees right here. That's just guaranteed crown fire right there as it moves through. And you can actually already see some of that crown fire activity going on through that nighttime camera shot. So as we go to the, there's just shifted over. If we go to the other imagery here, we can replay that one. This is the Indian Ridge camera. You can see that one pyrocumulus pop up right there. There's one part of that live shot where you can see that white smoke plume right there. Looks like continued activity into the nighttime hours, and then you can really see those flames as it switches to the nighttime view. So again, back to the West Zone, I just want to finish reading that. Damage inspection teams will continue their assessments of critical infrastructure and key resources. So that's unfortunate news that there are still some reports waiting to come back. I just noticed somebody in the live chat is looking for an update for a specific area, so let's check it out. Janesville. And usually works best if you use... Okay. Oh yeah, so this is an area of the fire that we were looking at earlier, because it's that northeastern section of the Dixie Fire where we have just a large hotspot coming off of it right now. We can look at that on this imagery very well. You can see how much fire activity we have on that northeastern section. And again, the predominant wind direction on the Dixie Fire has been from the southwest, so that acts to continue to push the fire to the northeast. And also, actually, based on how the smoke is moving, mostly westerly winds right there. So you can see it's pushing that fire mostly to the east right there, which is good news for the eastern shore of Lake Almanor because it's pushing the fire away from you, but bad news for the large amount of structures that we're looking at northeast of the Dixie Fire. Again, let's hope they just have a massive amount of their resources. Again, we have 5,800 personnel on this fire right now. Let's hope that they have a huge amount of resources up in this area working as hard as they can to get some good containment lines in this area. Now, one thing I will say, there is some good news when it comes to this. Oh, and actually, first thing I should have said this right off the bat is I put the relevant links in the description of this video. So if the area where you live has any chance of being under evacuation warning, make sure to keep updating those links. Make sure to stay updated with your local resources. I purposely don't go over those myself because I don't want to be a middleman where you introduce the possibility for confusion, but those links are in the description. And one thing I will say is, if you're in an area, or it's actually not just me saying this, this is where I'll be a middleman for CAL FIRE, because this is a point they continuously drive home is sorry, I was trying to read the live chat, is if you're in an area that does become under an evacuation order, the best thing you can do is evacuate, because then the firefighters don't have to worry as much on getting people out, and then they can focus more on actually saving your property. So again, if you're in this area, this one is better at showing the city names. So again, we have Janesville here, we have Buntingville, we have Johnstonville, Susanville. Those are the areas that are just to the northeast of this fire. And again, that is another one of my top concerns right now, because the predominant wind direction, especially during the afternoon hours, is from the southwest. So that will act to continue to push this fire further to the northeast. So I would certainly stay updated on any evacuation orders that might be picking up. So I was going to mention one bit of good news that hopefully can reduce any fear that is out there right now. I know most fear is justified on the Dixie Fire right now because we are seeing a lot of activity on it. But we do have the 2020 Sheep Fire in here that I'm hoping removed enough fuels in this area that it will at least slow the Dixie Fire down. Because as we can see, there's a large amount of structures just to the northeast of the Dixie Fire. So it's actually good news to see that we had a fire here in 2020. It might not stop the Dixie Fire, because everything we've seen with the Dixie Fire over the last week or two seems to go against everything you would expect would happen. For example, we saw it jump an entire firing operation and jump previous containment lines and then take off 15 miles in one day, especially on that northern section of the fire over here. But good news to actually see that we did have a previous fire there, so hopefully that'll be able to stop some of the spread, and hopefully there's also some containment lines that were made for the Sheep Fire that they'll just be able to reuse to protect those areas just to the northeast. And actually, I haven't shown this yet in the video, so this could be a good way to show what the Dixie Fire might do over the next couple of days. I'll reload it here, and while this is loading, I'll just describe what this is. This is the Wharf S Fire wildfire model. We run this out of the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory, and this is basically the top wildfire simulation in the world. Part of what we do at San Jose State is we actually drive up to fires with a radar truck and a LiDAR truck. We point it at the smoke plume, and we're able to collect a bunch of data about how the wildfire creates its own weather, and then how that weather further impacts the wildfire, and in some cases can lead to positive feedback loops. And then we put all of that information, as well as the weather, fuel, topography, anything you can imagine that could affect a wildfire, we put it into this wildfire simulation. Again, this is called Wharf Fire, and create a forecast for what this fire is going to do over the next couple of days. So now I will play this. Actually, before I play it, I'm just going to remind you that this is an experimental forecast only. So as I play this, you might see just a massive amount of growth going directly into an area where there's a large amount of structures, but this doesn't take into account all the amazing firefighters and the different strategies that they might put in place. You can't really put that into a model because it's something that might change on a minute-by-minute basis. So again, just an experimental forecast. I have to say that disclaimer before I press play. So one thing you notice here is during the early morning hours, we have much weaker winds, and then as we start to get into, right there you can see 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, that's when the winds start to pick up, and especially from the west throughout the day today. So if we zoom in over to the northeastern section of this fire, you should be able to see, let's go back to this afternoon, right there. So you should be able to see as those westerly winds come in, that has the act of pushing that fire further and further forward. So now let's look at what it's actually expecting. Again, today is the 8th, so let's see what it's expecting for the 9th. We'll zoom out here. Sorry, that was probably a little confusing to see. I'll go back to the start of the day. So this is one of the most interesting things to see on this model is during the early morning hours. Again, that's about 12 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. You have mostly down canyon winds. So you see how the winds are blowing from the north. And then as we get later into the day, still down canyon as it's still about 9 in the morning, but then every single day around 12, 1 o'clock, you see those winds shift around right there and change to a more southwesterly direction. And then you can see the impact that has on the fire, where you start getting much more growth towards the northeastern sections of the fire as those southwesterly winds continue to push it forward. So again, this fire continuing to forecast more growth on the northeastern sections of the Dixie Fire, as the predominant wind direction will continue to be from the southwest. So we never finished reading the update for the east side of the Dixie Fire. Can you zoom towards the top to see? I believe maybe you were just talking about the Wharf Fire model, but I actually just closed that link. We can zoom up to the top right here, where we are picking up some hot spots around where we do have some structures here. Again, still looks like it's a bit of a ways away, and we do have, again, that 2020 sheep fire, which has hopefully cleared out some of the fuels in this area, which should hopefully slow it down. But again, if you're in these areas, I would certainly stay updated on any recent evacuation orders. The other two key priorities right now is that eastern shore of Lake Almanor, where we can see that massive hotspot popping up right there, and Westwood as well, which looks much closer to that hotspot than we would like to see. Another way to view that, just an illustration of how much activity we are seeing on that eastern shore of Lake Almanor. There's that hotspot, and key thing I notice is that even though we're getting into the nighttime hours now, the fire doesn't seem to be calming down at all. Big reason for that is the relative humidity has been staying very low over the overnight hours, which allows that fire to continue overnight. But again, you can see the smoke mostly going to the east right now, so our fire activity over the next couple of hours will continue to be those winds will continue to try to push the fire further to the east. Now, just going to take one quick sip of water before we check out the update on the east zone. Alrighty, so I'll just remind you exactly what the east zone is when we're talking about the east zone. Again, that's basically, if you were to draw a line right through the middle of the fire, that would be the east zone. That is the part of the fire where we're seeing the most activity as of right now. So I'm very interested to read what CAL FIRE had to say about the east zone in their update. Again, if you're just joining the live stream, this is the incident update for the Dixie Fire. The CAL FIRE, I don't believe, did an update today, so we're going over this just to see what the most recent information is. Dixie Fire is up to 490,000 acres, which makes it the second largest wildfire in the history of California. Containment remains at 21%. There are 13,000 structures threatened right now, and unfortunately 627 structures have been destroyed, and we still do have some of those damage assessment teams coming back. So unfortunately, we will likely see that number continue to grow over the next couple of days. But now let's just look at the update for the east zone. Very interested to read this because, as you can see, we're seeing a large amount of activity on that east zone right now, and that is near a large amount of structures. So let's see what they have to say. Fire behavior increased due to the lifting of the smoke inversion. That's something we've talked about throughout the entire course of this video, and actually throughout the last couple of days. This has been the predominant feature of these wildfires, where it's been very calm in the morning hours because all that smoke keeps your temperatures down. It keeps the winds down as well. Oh, that is actually a good point. Somebody just pointed out, you have to keep in mind CalTopo has an issue seeing through the smoke. That is certainly something we were seeing yesterday, where it looked like the Dixie Fire was basically out, but it was just because there was so much smoke over the area. So that's actually a great point that I mentioned that yesterday, but I hadn't mentioned that in this video yet. When it comes to those hotspots, again, based on how much smoke we have in the area, the satellites do have a hard time seeing through that. So the actual hotspots may in fact be larger than that. So let's certainly hope they're not, but that is a very good point. Thank you for posting that in the live chat to remind me of that. Very good thing to bring up right there. So again, back to what I was saying is, in the early morning hours over the last couple of days, we've had a large amount of smoke that have been keeping our temperatures down. There was one day on the Dixie Fire where we had so much smoke that our forecast was for 90 degrees, and then we actually only ended up getting up to 71 degrees. We were supposed to have 20 mile per hour winds, and we only got 8 mile per hour winds. So I know smoke is terrible when it comes to air quality and the ability to use aircraft, but when it comes to fire behavior, it's actually a good thing because sometimes it can make just a cap or an inversion over your fires and keep that fire behavior down. But as you can see throughout the late afternoon and evening hours over the last couple of days, and especially throughout the evening hours as of right now, as that fire breaks through the inversion, we've been seeing the activities pick up, and especially on the Dixie Fire right to the east of Lake Almanor, where you can see, if you look closely, you'll be able to see just a massive pyrocumulus cloud coming up right there. And again, that is a part of the fire that's near a large amount of structures, so we are going to have to continue to watch that closely. So coming back here, fire behavior increased due to the lifting of the smoke inversion, warming temperatures, and low relative humidity. So basically everything we've been talking about throughout the course of this video, the critical fire danger, and then as it breaks through that inversion in the afternoon and evening hours, that is forecasted to have a poor to moderate recovery overnight. So I think the best way, sometimes that gets a little too technical when they talk about poor recovery overnight. So a way to actually illustrate that is by coming here. This is the forecast for the Dixie Fire. You can see temperatures over the next 2 days. That's something we talked about earlier in this video, is we have some very critical fire weather conditions coming in later this week. You can see on Tuesday, we're expected to get up into the mid-90s with some relative humidity in the low teens to single digits. But that poor recovery that they were just mentioning in that report, that's where you would like to see your relative humidity jump up to maybe 60 to 80% in the overnight hours, so the fire calms down. But you can see we remain below 50% relative humidity all night long, which is what allows the Dixie Fire to continue to see this much activity, even though it's about 9:30 right now. And if we look at the alert wildfire cameras, you can see just how active this fire is. Again, just to drive that point home, it's because we're not getting that great recovery in this area. It's remaining very dry, and especially in the higher elevations where you might only get up to maybe 30% relative humidity. And you can see how much activity we have on the Dixie Fire as the conditions remain dry throughout the overnight hours. This is a camera we're certainly going to have to keep our eye on over the next couple of days, as it looks like those flames are about to come over the ridge right here. And then they zoom over, show where that fire also is. And then this was another crazy image coming out of the Indian Ridge camera. You're about to see a big pyrocumulus pop up right there as that smoke plume starts to take off. And then once it switches to the night vision here, you'll be able to see where a large amount of that fire activity and growth is on this fire right along the perimeter right there. And it really shows how fire and topography interact. When you have a steep hill like this, it certainly likes to move uphill, and the steeper the terrain, the faster the fire is able to move. So just coming back here, low relative humidity, forecast to have poor moderate recovery overnight. That's why we're seeing so much activity on those live cameras right now. More aggressive fire behavior and movement occurred in the area between the Walker and Sheep fire scars, and fire managers are shifting personnel to this area. So let's see exactly what they're talking about on the Cal Topo map. Again, we've been talking about the Sheep Fire basically all video here. So fire, they said the fire picked up between the Moonlight and Sheep Fire scars. So there's the Sheep Fire right there. There's Moonlight, and you can see where that fire activity has picked up. It looks like we're seeing less activity directly over the Sheep Fire. Again, big reason for that is hopefully there's a large amount of fuels that were cleared out of this region in 2020 when the Sheep Fire burned. But it looks like we're seeing a lot of activity just move around the Sheep Fire, which again is a concern because we do have a very large amount of structures just northeast of this fire, which again is my main concern because we're mostly seeing southwesterly winds in the afternoons, which act to push this fire to the northeast. So somebody just asked, Cal Fire making airdrops hold? I believe in this update they said they were able to use some aircraft throughout the day today. I forget where we read that, but I remember reading that somewhere that they were actually able to use some aircraft on the Dixie Fire today. And that's because we had less smoke earlier in the day. You can actually see that on the satellite imagery. Less smoke earlier in the day, but over the last couple hours, large amount of smoke coming off. So I'd be surprised if they're actually able to use some aircraft on it right now. Actually, you know what? I believe there is a website for this. I've never actually used this website, so hopefully it's very intuitive and I can figure it out instantly. But, okay. So, before my update and forecast tomorrow, I'll try to get good at this website because I've never actually used it before. But it looks like we have a number of aircraft around the Dixie Fire. I imagine those aren't commercial flights purposely flying through where we have a large amount of wildfire smoke. So I'm just going to assume that those are some aircraft purposely fighting this fire. And it's good to see that it looks like there's at least 4 aircraft in this area. So hopefully those are dropping some retardant or anything on this fire to be able to help calm it down a little bit. So again, I'm going to not spend too much time on this website right now because I don't actually know how to use it yet, but I'll make sure to figure out that website before my forecast tomorrow. So coming back here to the east zone, more aggressive fire behavior and movement occurred in the area between the Walker and Sheep Fire scars. Fire managers are shifting personnel to this area. So again, that is one of our big concerns right now, where we have a large amount of activity right there. We do have the Sheep and Moonlight fire scars right there, but it looks like it is edging around the sheep fire right now. But it's great to hear that they're redistributing their resources into this area to get some good containment lines, hopefully some dozer lines, and hopefully able to drop some retardant as well. So just coming back here, finally it says, firefighters continue to make progress in securing lines in the area south of Westwood. So that, I'm so glad that we read the incident report, because that is one of the areas that I was the most concerned about throughout this entire live stream is Westwood right there. You can see where that hotspot is right there. So the fact that they just said, or at least in the 7 p.m. update, they said firefighters continue to make progress in securing lines in the area south of Westwood. That is great news, because that is the area of the fire where I would say that's the area I am still the most worried about, because who's to say what's happened in the last 2 hours, 40 minutes since that update came out. We're certainly seeing a lot of activity picking up, but that was the main area I was concerned about, just for 2 reasons. 1, how close it is to that hotspot, and 2, because that's in a more dangerous position when it comes to the predominant wind direction, which is mostly from the west and the southwest, which is good if you're on that east shore of Lake Almanor. That would act to push the fire away, but again, certainly going to keep following that area closely, because it looks like that is getting into the territory where the fire is a bit too close for comfort, but at least it sounds like CAL FIRE did make some progress in that area throughout the day today. So just going to throw up the alert camera right here while I take a quick sip of water. Alrighty, so just based on that camera, you can see how much activity we've had on the Dixie Fire over the last couple of hours. We saw that based on the satellite imagery as well. Again, in the early morning hours, we had that nice smoke inversion, but as we got into the afternoon, as it got hotter, as relative humidity went down, fire has certainly started to pick up, and it's getting closer to a large number of structures, so this is an ongoing developing situation. So, actually, somebody just commented, finally breathable air here. I haven't gone over the air quality once in this video, mainly because obviously the top concern is the wildfire itself and how close it's getting to structures. But I will show the air quality just once right here and the forecast for what it's going to be doing tomorrow. So, as of right now, you can see slightly better air quality than yesterday. Part of the reason for that is because of those smoke inversions the last couple of days, we've had less smoke being produced than when that red flag warning was over us and all of our fires were just taking off. Especially the northwestern fires seem to be calmer today than they were in the past, but still a large amount of unhealthy to even very unhealthy and hazardous air, especially over northern California there. If we look at the forecast, again, I always take the forecast for the air quality with a grain of salt. Seems like whenever you're producing as much smoke as we're currently seeing and as much smoke as was produced over the last hour or two, during the overnight hours, what happens is the winds calm down, and then some of that smoke is able to settle down into the surface and into the Sacramento Valley as well. So most likely going to be seeing some more poor air quality over the next couple of days. Now, one other great link to always look at when it comes to air quality is this one. I always like to look at this one because it actually shows how that smoke is moving. So most of the smoke from the Dixie Fire you can see finding its way into Nevada because the winds are mostly from the west right now, but you can see that smoke stretching all the way down into Southern California, where we still have some unhealthy air there. Looks like we'll get some better air around the Bay Area tomorrow afternoon and early Tuesday morning as the onshore winds pick up and blow some of that smoke out of our coastal areas around the Bay Area. But again, Northern California still expecting very poor smoke and air quality as large amount of smoke being produced right now. So again, we've been looking at the Dixie Fire, especially throughout the course of this video. There's 3 main areas on the Dixie Fire that seem to be blowing up right now. I think the best way to look at it is actually this imagery right here. You can see top concern right now is that area around Lake Almanor and Westwood, where we see that large hotspot. But we're also seeing more growth on the northeastern finger of this fire, which is going to be a concern over the next couple of days as we have a large amount of structures to the northeast of that hotspot, and the winds will continue to be predominantly from the southwest. We also have another large hotspot on the northern edge of the fire, but again, there aren't as many structures in that area. And then one new thing that's actually different from yesterday's update and forecast was this flare-up on the western side of the fire. So very interested to see CAL FIRE's report tomorrow morning to see what exactly happened there, because much more activity there than we've been seeing in the previous few days. So what is the image I'm using? So this is the College of DuPage website. It's my favorite way to look at satellite imagery, and it's using natural color fire. And then there's one account on Twitter that actually combines this with the true color and comes out with some very, very good wildfire simulations, I'll put it that way. So again, on the Dixie Fire, those are the 3 areas that we're seeing the most activity right now. My main concern as of right now is the Westwood and east shore of Lake Almanor, where we had the most amount of fire activity appears to be occurring right now. And it is close to those structures. Another big priority, I believe, over the next couple of days is as we get to the northeastern section of this fire, where you can see it starting to creep around where the sheep fire burned in 2020. Turn the fire history off in a second so you can just get a clear image of what that looks like. Looks like it's starting to come around the sheep fire. And again, we have a number of cities up in this area. Still seeing some distance between there, and what I'm hoping is that the sheep fire burned down enough fuels in 2020 that it'll at least slow the fire down and give our firefighters a better chance at stopping it. But that's going to be a key spot I'm watching over the next few days. As you can see, that's a part of the fire where we have a large amount of activity and a large amount of structures as well, where we have these cities. If we zoom in here, we'll get all the cities. We have Buntingville, Janesville, Johnstonville, and Susanville. Again, hotspots around that area, or not around that area, but getting close to that area right now. So I'll keep a good eye on that in future forecast videos. So when it comes to the Dixie Fire, let's update it again just in case it has changed. Dixie Fire is up to 490,000 acres. It is at 21% containment. It is now the second largest wildfire in the history of California. Thank you very much, Lucy, for the generous super chat, and also for being such a great moderator over the last couple days. Again, I apologize to everybody for not being able to read the live chat as much. I'm sure you guys are saying a bunch of questions, and hopefully other people in the live chat are able to answer your questions, but still trying to master the art of looking at maps, talking, and reading the live chat at the same time. Hopefully I'll figure it out eventually. But again, what I was saying is that the Dixie Fire, second largest wildfire in the history of California, at about 500,000 acres as of right now. And there's a large amount of evacuation warnings in place. Most likely, I probably shouldn't say this yet because it's just speculation, but I imagine there's going to be some new evacuation orders popping up over the next couple days. So definitely keep a close eye on all those links I put in the description, the CAL FIRE website, InsaWeb website, or any of your local resources that might have that information. Now, one number that did get updated that I I don't like to report this number, I'll put it that way, but we are up to 627 structures destroyed on the Dixie Fire, and unfortunately we do still have some damage assessment teams coming back with more information, so hate to say it, but we will likely see this number continue to rise over the next couple days as that information comes back from those damage assessment teams. So again, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by this wildfire. Now, where the good news comes in is we have just a massive amount of resources on this. I believe more resources on this fire than I can remember on any of those fires I reported on last year, and those were some large fires. We had the August complex, which grew to 1 million acres. We had the SCU, LNU, CZU lightning complex wildfires, and I don't ever remember seeing 5,800 personnel in a fire. So great to see that while this fire certainly looks out of control and near or threatening 13,000 structures right now, at least we have an army of 5,800 personnel, in some cases working around the clock to protect our lives and property. So that's the update on the Dixie Fire. I'll give one quick update on the other fires. My apologies if you've been interested in the Mcfarland, Monument, Antelope, River Complex fires, as I barely spent any time on those today, but Mcfarland Fire, Monument Fire, there's the Haypress Fire, River Complex, Antelope Fire. Main reason I didn't spend as much time on those today is just because of the developing situation as those hotspots are getting closer to some of those structures around the Dixie Fire. But quickly going over the numbers for these fires, Mcfarland Fire is up to 32,000 acres with 26% containment. Monument Fire is at 50,000 acres with 3% containment. River Complex is at 25,000 acres with 5% containment. And the Antelope Fire is at 42,000 acres with 24% containment. So with the 10 minutes that we have left, I'll just try to do the final wrap-up and summary for the Dixie Fire. Take a quick drink of water before I do this. All right, so we're back for the final update and summary on the Dixie Fire. We had moderated conditions throughout the early morning hours as that smoke inversion kept our temperatures and our winds down. But you can see once we got into the afternoon, the temperature got hotter, the relative humidity got lower, our winds picked up, and the fire activity picked up as well. You can see large smoke plume coming off of that northern section of the fire, but again, not as many structures up there. Key concerns right now is that large pyrocumulus cloud blowing up right to the east of Lake Almanor, and then that northeastern section that is starting to creep closer to the large communities just northeast of the Dixie Fire, where I haven't checked the most recent evacuation warnings, but most likely going to be seeing some new ones over the next couple days. And then the one other new piece of information on the Dixie Fire is this western edge seems to have flared up again. That's something that looked relatively calm in the previous days, but looks like that activity picked up over the last couple of hours. If we look at actually where this fire is burning, biggest thing I notice is right around the Lake Almanor Westwood area, how much heat is coming off of the Dixie Fire right there. So that, I would say, is the big concern right now. Thank you, Dan, for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. Now, I think this could be a good way to illustrate the large activity that we're having on the Dixie Fire as of right now. So this fire has been relatively weird the last couple of days. It has been calm in the morning and even into the afternoon hours, because that thick smoke that we've had over it, keeping our temperatures low and our winds calm as well. But then, as you can see, as you get into the afternoon hours, or late afternoon into the evening, that's where this fire has really started picking up. And just based on the Dire Mountain camera, you can see that large smoke plume coming off of the fire over the last hour, and then some of those flames starting to come over this ridge right here. Going to be keeping my eye on this camera because Once it gets over this ridge, you can see it better during the daytime, but there is a massive amount of fuels in this area, so that has the potential for this fire just to continue to spread closer and closer to this camera. Now, the other camera that we were looking at was the Indian Ridge camera. You'll be able to see a pyrocumulus cloud pop up right here. You can think so much rising air right there. You get more air coming in, fueling the fire and spreading it faster. And as it switches to night vision, you'll be able to see where that fire is burning the most actively right on the perimeter there, likely moving farther uphill. So again, final update on the Dixie Fire numbers. It is up to about 500,000 acres. It is now the second largest wildfire in the history of California. 21% containment, large number of evacuation orders still in place. We are unfortunately up to 627 structures destroyed, but good news is we have 30 helicopters, 525 engines, 129 dozers, 135 water tenders, 5,800 personnel, and 97 crews. So the fight on this one is certainly going to be hard over the next couple of days, but the good news is we have a lot of resources on it, and we're certainly going to need them. As you can see, it has been flaring up over the last hour or two, and flaring up in some concerning areas. I'd say the top concern for me right now, again, I haven't been spending much time in this live stream on Twitter just because Twitter can sometimes get a bit distracting during these live streams, but I'll look up there to see if there's any very updated, important information coming out, and I'll use that in my update for tomorrow. But just based on all of the maps we've been looking at and at the weather features, my key concern right now is Westwood, because that's very near the hottest part of the fire that we're looking at on that satellite imagery, the part of the fire with the largest pyrocumulus cloud. And the winds will continue to be predominantly from the southwest, which will act to continue to push this fire farther to the northeast. One piece of good news I have to say there is in their most recent CAL FIRE update, they said firefighters continue to make progress in securing lines in the area south of Westwood. So that is my major concern, but sounds like they did make some progress in that area. Second major concern is that east shore of Lake Almanor. The one piece of good news is that we've mostly been seeing westerly winds that would act to push this fire away. And I did hear one CAL FIRE update that said they're working as hard as they could on structure protection to get some good lines in this area to protect the eastern shore of Lake Almanor. But again, just based on how close those hotspots are, that is certainly a big concern moving forward. And thank you very much, Dan, for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. And thanks for the compliment as well. I will certainly continue to make these updates and forecast every single day. So every single day, because we're going to have some challenging fire weather conditions moving forward, which I'll show in just a second. But first, I want to talk about my third major area to watch. This might be a little bit farther out in the forecast than those first two major priority spots we were looking at, but the areas northeast of the fire are now becoming a concern as we've had a large amount of growth on that northeastern section of the Dixie Fire over the last 24 hours. I know CAL FIRE is repositioning a lot of their resources to protect these cities up here. We can look at exactly what those are. I believe it's Susanville. Can zoom in there. We have Susanville, Janesville, Buntingville, number of other cities as well, and overall just a large amount of structures in that area. And again, southwesterly winds over the next couple days, so that fire will try to continue to move to the northeast. So good news is that CAL FIRE said they're repositioning some resources up here, and the other good news is we do have the sheep fire from 2020 in this area, so that means at least some of these fuels should be burned out, so that'll at least act to slow the fire growth down, which should hopefully help our firefighters out. So those are the three top priorities on the Dixie Fire moving forward. And then what I kind of teased earlier is that we have some challenging conditions moving forward in the in the fire weather forecast. We'll just zoom in, we'll click right around there because that looks to be area of fire that's the most active right now. We'll go to tomorrow's forecast. You can see temperature-wise, we're expected to be a little bit warmer, up to 87 degrees. Very dry as well, relative humidity in the teens. Wind gusts should be around 25 to 30 miles per hour. So challenging conditions tomorrow, especially in the afternoon hours. So I hate to say it, but we're most likely to see continued growth on the Dixie Fire. And then I also don't like to say this, but as we get into the middle of the week, we have some even more challenging conditions come in as our temperatures get back up into the mid-90s and our relative humidity drops into the low teens to even the single digits. So it's going to be a fight over the next week. Main thing I always say is that Californians are resilient. We were able to get through 2020, and we will be able to get through 2021, but we do have a couple of tough months to get through first. Fuels are at record dry levels. You can see the impacts that that's having on our wildfires right now, with the Dixie Fire getting up to 500,000 acres, and then the Mcfarland, the Monument, the River Complex, the Antelope Fires, all, I believe, all over 20,000 acres at this point. So again, I hope this video was helpful. I do these update and forecast videos every single day. Guaranteed I will be doing them every day throughout this next week as we have those critical fire weather conditions coming in. So if you want to stay updated on all of these fires going on right now, and as well as throughout the rest of the 2021 season, and honestly, over the next 25 to 50 years, as this is the main thing that I'm going to focus on for the rest of my career, you can subscribe to this channel where I will continue to do these daily updates at least until fire season is over, which the end of that fire season just can't come soon enough. So finally, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires, and a huge thank you to all the firefighters on these fires, just working around the clock to keep our lives and our structures safe. So hopefully this video is helpful, and thank you to everyone who's watching. Hope you all have a good night, and last thing I'll say is be sure to stay updated on the evacuation warnings and orders, because it looks like there could be some developing situations over the next couple of hours and the next couple of days. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good night.